So can you tell please about a bit about yourself, like which kind of focus do you have in your work, and how are you working with the media, with the topics of media freedom?
I graduated from law school 20 years ago, and I have primarily been working as a lawyer. Moving into this area covering information law issues, media law issues, freedom of expression issues. About 8 years ago, I started to work on a PhD, which I finished in 2011. And afterwards, I joined University of Copenhagen as a professor in media law. And less than a year ago, I took this position as the head of research in media law at the Danish School of Media and Journalism. So I'm responsible for what we teach in media law, freedom of expression, and other law topics. I'm not performing the teaching myself, all of it. Then I do a lot of research in media law areas, and it's a broad area. So I do a lot of research in conflicting interests between the freedom of expression and other important interests, as privacy, as the defamation issues, surveillance, and other stuff. Right now, I'm doing research in personality rights and in the right to be forgotten.
Mm-hmm. And if to focus like on the laws that are accepted in Denmark, like about the freedom of media, because if to compare with the other countries, like it's completely different. It's like one of the most progressive country, one of the 5 most progressive country. Like which kind of the laws does exist? Like it's not going to be the whole lecture, but maybe some specific laws that you can tell that could be interesting for all people working in this sphere.
Yeah, well, what is actually characteristic for the Danish media law area is that we have very few laws. It's not very regulated. Most of the media cases that are being brought before the courts, they're actually solved on the general regulation. For instance, in the criminal laws, the privacy protection in the criminal laws, they're applicable to the media, but we then interpret the principles of the European Court of Human Rights case law on this area in the Danish law. So actually we have very few laws that are directly aimed at the media. We have a media responsibility law. It's not dealing with what the media can or cannot do. It deals with the situation that if a media is liable for something, how should you place the responsibility? So that's the main law dealing directly with the media. Otherwise, we use the freedom of expression clause in our constitution, the Article 10 in the European Convention of Human Rights, as the basic regulation of the media.
If there are any like conflict situations, and which kind of the conflict situation do you have now? Because from one point of view, you can, like I also have been doing a short questionnaire in the city, like outside in Copenhagen, like what do people think about the freedom of expression, and it feels that people are really like happy with the system and with everything, but afterward they're trying to remember this situation with caricatures and this the other situation and the conflicts. And they start to think about limits and everything. So like which kind of like backwards or basics do you have, like which kind of things do you have that you need also to remember and to be aware of?
Well, basically we have a very large freedom of expression and freedom of the media. There are a general perception that the media, they're basic institution in a democratic society, and they have to have very wide frames for what they can do. I think that everybody would agree about that. But then on the other hand, we have had situations that have given rise to a lot of both public but also political debate. One of them was the cartoons. It's now 10 years ago from now, and the printing of the cartoons was a kind of an explosion. It was very surprising, both for that newspaper that printed them, but also for the Danish society, how it was received not only in Denmark but also in the Middle East. And of course, we're still dealing with what happened there, and why was this such a big thing? And there has been two different schools actually. One saying you have to accept that everybody can say everything about anybody. There should be actually no limits, no taken account of religion, of sexuality, of other things that could be perceived as offensive to someone. We have to do everything. And then there is another school saying, well, yes, we have freedom of expression, we have freedom of the media. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be cautious of what we print. We should take care, we should be aware that some kind of expressions, some kind of cartoons, some kind of articles, they can be offensive to some people, and we should really think very close before we print something. So that's the two schools that I would believe are still, it's still like this in Denmark. That's the one thing. The other thing I would like to mention is that 2 years ago, a media scandal in Denmark was revealed. One of the gossip magazines, they had entered into some kind of cooperation with a person with access to credit card information, and due to this contact, they were able to actually surveil famous people. Now he's in that restaurant, now he's using his card in this country, now he's buying plane tickets, now he's, things like that. Yeah. So they were actually able to get hold on stories about those, famous people through their credit card transactions, which is of course illegal.
Yeah, in the name of their newspaper, which one?
It's a gossip magazine called Se and Hør. Mm-hmm. And it was revealed, and this scandal was, it got a lot of attention. It was on the front pages for a long time, and the investigation is still going on, and nobody has been charged yet. But as far as I'm concerned, the investigation will lead to some kind of conclusion during this fall. And this scandal gave rise to a lot of considerations and a lot of debate about, do we have the media we deserve? Are they willing to, overstep any boundaries to get their stories? What is it for a ethical landscape that we're having today? So there has been some parliamentary working groups focusing on media ethics, focusing on sources that are paid for tips about famous people or other things, and it hasn't actually resulted in any legal or legislative changes yet, but I think there must be some kind of considerations when this case is finished.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and as I understand correctly, so you're trying, from one point of view, everything is working and really systematically arranged with the laws, with its regulation, but you still have some problems and something to improve. But if there are any ideas for the improving of this law system, to make these limits more obvious, and if you really need this?
It's a very different question to answer, because a lot of things are actually working together here. First of all, we have this perception of the good thing about having very free medias. So the parliament, they are applying what we call an arm's length principle in terms of the regulation of the media. So this arm's length principle means that they will only make very general legislation. At the same time, they leave to the media to have a self-justice system. So we have what we call the press council, and they're overseeing and supervising the press ethical rules in Denmark. So if you feel that the media has done something wrong to you, you can go and make a complaint to this press council. And this has nothing to do with the courts, nothing to do with the legislator. This is a press system. However, this system, which is actually working quite well, it's fast, it's cheap, it's also well balanced, in my view. But there are the downsides, that they cannot award any compensation, and they cannot punish or impose any sanctions on the media. They can only express their criticism, which then must be printed in the media. But that means that a lot of people think this is not enough for me. I would like them to be punished, I would like them to be fined, I would like a compensation.
Okay, and if also to talk about this system that was built historically, the system of laws, so how did it happen? I mean, how much of the efforts were, and I mean the people's work were arranged to build this system? Mm-hmm. Because like it's really important now for the other countries to get maybe this experience. For sure it's connected with the political system and with their things, how the system of the country is arranged. But if to speak about the experience of Denmark, what do you think, like historically, how was it built, and if it's possible to build the same system or to take the best way for building in the other countries where this system was not built?
Do you mean this the press council system, or do you mean the general system?
I mean the general system that offered to make like this progressive and really working well media freedom institute.
Well, for many years, you know, the media and the regulation of the media was not a big issue. Really, it was just working. Sometimes there was a case, but it wasn't really a big issue. What I think changed a lot in Denmark was when our courts, the Danish courts, they started to implement the European Court of Human Rights principle in Danish law. That made a big difference, because now we have a system that are basically concerned around the balancing between conflicting interests. That is actually the main media law principle in Denmark, that you have to balance the freedom of expression, the freedom of the media, against other valuable interests, like privacy, like the person's honor, like things like surveillance, other things that are conflicting rights. Personality rights is a good example as well. The right to be forgotten. And this is actually not regulated anywhere. These are case law principles that we have adopted from the European Court of Human Rights, and that is now the main the main keystones of the Danish media law system. And this has been, I would say that it's not that many years ago that the Danish courts started a kind of interpreting these principles into Danish law. It started in the middle of the 1990s, and then it's still going on. they're still putting layers to this principle. What we're still primarily working around this concept of balancing conflicting rights. So this was actually not an answer of your question. So my answer would be that in Denmark, which of course it is, we have had freedom of expression since our constitution was adopted in 1849. But we haven't really developed a media law until a specific media law until we started implementing these principles from the Strasbourg court. So, if you do that, that would be a very big step forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and like as an expert who is making research in this sphere, like which kind of the ways of the decision you could prognose maybe, or you could find maybe some way, like which steps could we move? For sure, we cannot change like the whole political situation, like the whole political system, but which kind of the steps could you think might be useful for different countries?
I think for new countries, developing new democracies, as the country you come from, I think it could be a very good idea to implement or to adopt or to get inspiration from our press council system. Because often what we hear at least is that there'll still be some kind of interference from the political system into the press. And this is not what we would like. We would like to have a free press that is independent from political attachment, and that are able to actually go close to the political decisions, to the political system, to any kind of people with power. And therefore I believe that to have a press council system that is a self-justice system that the press is running, that would be some kind of foundation for developing a free press system. But I think it's a very difficult issue also in our countries. How are we going to develop the regulation and the laws of the media? And one of the reasons for that is, there are more reasons. One reason is media law are global. It is not very important what each country has of legislation, because the European Court of Human Rights and the European Court of Justice, they're actually the ones that are deciding on this area nowadays. And the national courts and parliaments have to implement these decisions. So that's one thing. The other thing is the media itself are global. The media, they're digital, they're social. It's the printed paper is rare. So television, electronic media, digital media, they go everywhere. And so that means that we in some way have to develop some kind of common standards. Both on the ethical, what do you actually show? Do you show dead people in TV? Do you show black people being shot of the police in the US? We had a discussion about that in Denmark. Is it something that you actually put on television, put on your websites? Police actually shooting, a man dying. What is the ethical approach to this? Is that something we actually show? So that's something we have to agree about in a way, worldwide. That's one thing. Another thing is, how far does the media freedom go? That's another thing, also global. Nowadays, Danish newspapers, they're part of a group working with leaked documents of Luxembourg and Switzerland to try to get information about companies using these countries for tax purposes. This is not Danish. This is an international corporation which also raise these questions about which law apply here. Is it Danish law? Is it Luxembourg law? Is it Switzerland law? Or what? I don't know. So that's the other thing. And the third thing I would like to mention is the social media. Their impact is, we're actually not able to actually decide what their impact is. We know that the social media are not only run by journalists that are educated, that know about the ethical rules, that know how to write and to disseminate an article, a history, a story. But that is also a lot of normal people that are just writing their stuff on the internet. Are they actually, do they deserve to enjoy the media freedom? Or are the media freedom only for professional media? That's another issue that you in your country will have to consider. What is the media? And this is also, in my opinion, a global issue, because the social media, they're all over. So I think there's a lot of things that are actually influencing the development of the media regulation, but also the general perception of how do we cope with this? Is it still the traditional media we have to secure and to protect with our media laws? Or is it also the social media users, the citizen journalists as we call them, are they also protected? Question mark.
Yeah, this is also a question. So this is like practically also the topics for your research, right?
For sure. Mm-hmm. Very, it's obvious. We're working with that all the time. We have a PhD student right now at this school working about the regulation of social media to find out what is the social media.
Yeah, but it's like a transferring period, just like they still are not in the main laws, and like a couple of years ago in Belarus it also was like social media and even the media, just the printed version of the newspaper, they were out of the law of the mass media.
Yeah.
And there were really big discussions. So how is it working now in Denmark? Like is there any laws practically and specifically about social medias?
No, the general rules apply to social media, but of course the problem about that is that the social media culture, how do people actually act on the social media, they're moving much faster than any legislative initiatives. So you're always behind. We have had a discussion in Denmark I think it was during the spring, about the tone, the debate tone and the debate attitude on the social media, primarily Facebook, where there are some people that have a tendency to be, to use very bad language, very offensive language against women politicians, against foreigners, refugees. That is another issue that are on the agenda. The general, you can say, when we had the social media and the digital media, we had a kind of democratization of information. It was very accessible for ordinary people. Everybody can actually take part in the debate because everybody has a profile on Facebook. So that's a very good thing, that it's not only the traditional media that are facilitating this infrastructure of the public debate. So that's a good thing. But the bad thing is, or maybe the downside, if you could say so, is that the debate tone is just it has a very low level, which means that a lot of the people that actually know something about something, that actually have an opinion, that are not based just on feelings or I saw this today. Yeah, exactly. They have a tendency to just not want to participate because the level is too low. So that's another thing we have to deal with in a way, to make sure that everybody, also the people that actually have something to say, that actually have a knowledge, that they also want to participate.
So finally, like getting the conclusions of really like nice and interesting points that are also should be discussed in different countries, that also should be, maybe some things should be taken. Like what would you say, like in which way should we move to protect the media freedom, and also what should we think about to keep these limits and to create it also internationally?
I think one thing is that you need good education. The journalists, they need to be very well educated. Not only in terms of being good at doing their work and getting out to people with their information, but also having knowledge enough to actually be critical to a very complex system of politics, of laws, of society that are the fact today. So you need to have journalists that actually are able to go to a CEO of a big company and say, hey, I can read your something and I can say this is not very good, and have the courage but also the knowledge to do that. The same in terms of the political system, the government, to have the knowledge, to have the confidence that I'm actually able to see through this and to go for the people and to ask the right questions, to be a critical journalist. I think that's a very important thing. If the journalists, they're well educated, it creates respect for their work, and that's very important in terms of developing a free press. So that's one thing, and another thing I would emphasize again is to developing this press council system, a self-justice system for the media, because this is also an implementing of arm's-length principle, and it gives the media again the confidence, but also the foundation to actually deal with these questions itself. So I would say that would be the most important things.
Okay, thank you very much for your interview. It will be extremely interesting for all the participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.